uDraw for Wii is the only way to turn your TV into an art studio. Paint, color, draw, and let your kids' imagination run wild. If you can dream it, you can create it, using a complete set of brushes, stamps, and colors. Discover a whole new way to play and draw the family together. Create your play with the uDraw game tablet. In stores now. Rated E for everyone.
Howdy, Earthlings. I've been wanting to get into art for a while, but never had the time or money to invest in expensive hardware like a PC and a tablet. Ignore my gaming PC and the free tablet that I got from XP Pen for an unboxing video. Sure, it's a drawing tablet, but I'm a gamer too, and I need my tablet to do a little more than drawing and playing Osu. If you're like me, then your prayers were answered over a decade ago. And if you're not like me, then your nightmares were answered. This is the uDraw tablet. uDraw? Gee, I sure hope I draw, that's why I got it. This device was made by THQ. The same THQ that makes good games when it feels like it, but also bad games when rent is due. Basically, this is an artist tablet on a budget. It features a draw area that interacts with the pressure-sensitive pad in a way similar that you'd expect from a screenless Wacom, XP Pen, Gaumon, or other tablet. There are some quirks to it though, but we'll get into that when we are about to go into gameplay. Let's finish setting the scene here first. This tablet was released in 2010, where it was released exclusively for the Wii for a short time. This is because this thing might not exist without Nintendo's help, which the idea of that sounds absolutely bonkers. Even at this time, THQ had been known to put out some real stinkers, but Nintendo was confident that the idea could work. They're better than me, honestly. If THQ came to my front door asking to make a Sera Things game, I'd slam the door in their face and hope that a better offer was coming along soon. At this time, THQ was hot off the development process for their game Drawn to Life for the Wii, Drawn to Life: The Next Chapter. I've never played this one, only the DS version, and that one was pretty good. But I can't imagine a hell worse than drawing with a Wii remote. Well, I can imagine one hell worse than drawing with a Wii remote, and that's drawing with a control stick. But THQ must have also been very aware of how bad it is to play a drawing game with a Wii remote, and decided to make a drawing tablet to accompany Drawn to Life. While this specific tie-in never happened, it wasn't even made compatible with the previous Drawn to Life title, the tablet was still made. Unfortunately, as you'll find out, this tablet isn't anywhere near as bad as it seems. I say unfortunate because that means that it's actually the software's fault. Drawn to Life for the uDraw would have really made this thing great. Might have saved it, honestly. Now, THQ took the idea to Nintendo, and Nintendo agreed. They thought it was a great idea, but I'm not sure the level of involvement Nintendo had, but what Nintendo did do is that they helped to get it to be able to export images to the SD card, which took this from a gimmick to, oh, this is a serious product. See, being a digital artist at this time is expensive. You needed a PC, a drawing program, a drawing tablet, or really good hands and mouse skills. Back then, drawing programs didn't come in free options unless it was of the MS Paint variety. But the programs you paid for at the time were kind of amazing, kind of groundbreaking at the time. They could take even the worst artist from horrible to, hey, at least your lines are straight. They did this with a tool called pen stabilization or anti-aliasing, which could take your pen stroke and put it at a delay, making your lines no longer wobbly. It was an absolute game changer that we now take heavily for granted. Even my free Fire Alpaca has a pen stabilizer built in, and any art program would definitely be missing something if it didn't have the pen stabilizer built in. So this far back even, your drawing program affected what your art ability was, essentially. But if you wanted all this fancy stuff, you'd have to pray that your car doesn't break down in the next few months. We're looking at 1K at the cheapest and 4K plus if you want to go pro. Some things never change, right? Well, THQ's uDraw addressed this problem. Note that I said it addressed it, that it didn't solve anything, because I never said that it solved anything. No one quote me with that one. The uDraw tablet not only was a decent drawing tablet, it played games. 11 to be exact, and anything you drew could be exported to an SD card and uploaded to the internet. Even better, it was made for a Wii console, and everyone had one of those. For just the low cost of $70 to $80, you could start your career as a digital artist. Note that I said start and not start it off right, but for many kids, this was the only thing you'd get. The year following its release, it even came to the Xbox 360 and PS3 for a whole 4 months. Woo-wee! Before THQ canned development because they lost $100 million because no one was buying them. They had a whole whopping 1.5 million units in their warehouse unsold. THQ, instead of going, maybe we should make better software for it, decided that this meant that the market didn't want family-friendly fun, and went back to trying to appeal to its main audience of adult gamers. Are you kidding me? This is the year that games like Skylanders blew up. Maybe the issue isn't family-friendly so much as it is Penguins of Madagascar, Dr. Blowhole returns again. Well, THQ went bankrupt a few years later. Maybe it's because of the uDraw, or maybe the market didn't want adult games either. Maybe they should have been making games for the elderly. That's where the real money is. Let's talk about the features of this thing, then we can talk about that massive 11-game library. The uDraw tablet's most obvious trait is the Wii Remote fused into the board. At this time, it was very common for peripherals for the Wii to do this. Even Guitar Hero guitars did this because the Wii Remote and its umbilical cord basically functioned as all the internals needed for a wireless controller, and its functionality. The Wii Remote had buttons, gyros, an output port, Bluetooth, and all of that junk. So why design an entirely wireless controller when you can just plug in the Wii Remote and nestle it into the peripheral? The only companies that didn't really do this at the time were companies who wanted their peripherals to look like they cost more than $5 to make. Companies like Harmonix had their Rock Band guitars, for example. Very high quality premium looking guitar that definitely does not look like it was a Wii guitar. Anyway, it made sense. Why rebuild the wheel when there's a perfectly good one on your card already? The Wii Remote in this situation mostly functions as controls for the menus and most importantly as shortcuts for the art program. Undo in pretty much every single game on the uDraw is always minus and redo was always plus. Like a real art tablet. Shortcuts for, you know, that one thing, and it's standardized across the programs for the most part. The touch area for the pen here is seemingly pretty small, but it's actually pretty close to many screenless tablets at the time. I remember it being very close to my Intuos, the first drawing tablet that I had. The shape of the board itself is also quite comfortable and ergonomic with rounded edges at the bottom and grips, but still sits flat on a table, making it easy to get comfortable with or even easier to pass it around when it's someone else's turn in Pictionary. Lodged in the back is where your pen rests neatly and is easily grabbed when you're ready. The pen itself is actually pretty neat, but its biggest drawback has to be its incredibly short cord. It's just barely long enough to get it into the inkwell at the top right. And this was really short. It was about 8 inches, which is, you know, above average technically, but you know, bigger's always better. The pen has an up and down button that you'd expect on any modern tablet pen, and the tip is pressure sensitive. See, the tablet doesn't actually detect pen pressure. Everywhere I've read about this thing, they call it pressure sensitive. What they mean is when the tip is pressed down, it clicks in. That's it. It doesn't have levels of sensitivity between. When it clicks in, this is telling the tablet that it is in draw mode now. When it's unclicked, it's in cursor mode now. So it doesn't register input unless it's pressed in. I haven't played with any of the other tablets, like the Xbox 360 or PS3 version, but from what I've played with here, this is actually, and very surprisingly, a very good piece of kit. Even people on my stream were surprised by how good it is, and this is even almost 15 years after its creation. The only obvious drawback I can see is that nowadays, every device has a screen, and everyone has a device with a screen. Either they draw with a Cintiq or some other screen tablet, or they use a Surface smartphone or an iPad. If you're using one of these, like a Surface smartphone or iPad, this obviously was never going to be an upgrade for you. It's an entry tablet the same way a Wacom Intuos is. But if you own a Wii, buying a uDraw is kind of a better deal. Except for the fact that the software doesn't have modern features like stabilizers and custom brushes. But those were brand new at the time when this was being introduced. This makes it a perfect tablet for a kid though. Shame that it died before we could ever see what it would actually turn into. Although I feel like whatever it was going to turn into would have been killed off by the Wii U and eventually the Switch. It was never going to reach millions of sales. This wasn't that kind of toy or game. But for a niche audience, this would have been perfect, and it would have created so many artists. Now, I have seen the Scott the Woz segment on the uDraw tablet, and he mentions, I feel like the registration on these has declined over time. I personally think from my own experience with this tablet that I think that he got a bad one, or might have not quite figured out how to use it. See, for the cursor to show up on the screen, you need to have the tip of the pen touching the tablet or damn near close. It doesn't draw unless the tip is pressed fully down. I think it's much more likely that he got a bad one, because I'm not going to assume that he was using it wrong. I'm just saying it's a possibility. He's a smart dude, so I really think it's much more likely that he got a bad one, because this thing is incredibly intuitive. Most people could figure this out immediately first try. Me and Mabel used it for about 6 hours straight with no issues during the entire stream, except for the crash. But that was more of a software issue. Even after switching back and forth from using it on the Wii and a PC, it worked great the whole time. But ours was practically brand new. Absolutely untouched, no scratches or anything. I think I added more scratches than what were already on it. And if that doesn't tell you just how much the software sucked, that that the tablet wasn't used at all, then I don't know what will. Speaking of software, I think it's about time that we talked about what killed this tablet, and that's its very, very poor support. Here we have every single game that was released for the uDraw Studio, Pictionary, Dude's Big Adventure, SpongeBob SquigglePants, Kung Fu Panda 2, The Penguins of Madagascar Dr. Blowhole Returns, again, Disney Princess Enchanting Storybooks, Marvel Superhero Squad Comic Combat, Pictionary Ultimate Edition, and uDraw Studio Instant Artist. Disney Animator was planned, but ultimately cancelled, and like previously mentioned, the game that this tablet was designed for, Drawn to Life, never came out for it, and never received the ability to use it. So if you want to use a tablet on Drawn to Life the next chapter, you'll have to emulate it on your PC. If we don't count Ultimate Editions, then you can count on 2 hands pretty much every release this had. Which, according to my mathematician friend out there, that isn't much. uDraw Studio. uDraw Studio is the first game for the tablet and the original pack-in title for the Wii version. It was never released for Xbox and PlayStation because those games received Instant Artist as its pack-in title. And the studio itself, it's entirely an art studio kind of game, and I don't really know what they'd expect someone to say about this. It's like Kid Pix without the sound effects. It's a simple, bare-bones, Kid Pix style, inoffensive art program. You can choose your material, choose your background, choose your choice of pen, pencil, crayon, chalk, airbrushes, all that. It's very simple. When using it after a minute or two, it all just clicks and the tablet makes absolute total sense. Everything just works, which I was not expecting. This might be a toy, but it's also a very serious and working artist digital art tablet. For just the low price of $22, it'd be impossible to find a better deal, and you can find models that are even cheaper than that online. Even for its original retail price, you'd struggle to find better because most screenless tablets start at just $100. So this was selling for $70 to $80. This was a much better deal than just a regular tablet. At least if you're buying it for a child. If you're a professional, you're probably not using a Wacom Intuos in the first place. It lacks the pen stabilization options, and it lacks layers. Due to this, I'd say it's a better painting program than a drawing one, as if you're painting, you don't really need stabilization all that much. If you're someone who sketches with the tablet, then lines with a mouse, then these 2 games are great for that, although they don't have layers. So I think it's better for drawing on and then exporting and then drawing over it with, your PC. But there is one big issue. While drawing, Mabel and I ran into a full crash. And this was on real hardware, this wasn't emulated. These kinds of crashes in general, are pretty rare on the Wii. The music would still play, but we were unable to interact with the game, and even the home menu wouldn't pop up. This meant that we were unable to export our lovely drawing of our new OC, Maximus Thunder. He was going to be a big buff tiger with lightning bolts on his fur and dragon wings. Thankfully, Rook was there to give us a proper artist rendition of Mr. Thunder. If you decide to get this and try it out, I totally understand, because mine was only $22, and you can't get an art tablet that cheap anywhere. But make sure you're saving as often as possible. In the art department, there really isn't much to say. It works, and we were all very surprised at how well it did. This would have been a great child's first art tablet, if only it wasn't restricted to gaming consoles, or if it wasn't given up on so soon. I think marketing it as a gaming tool was a huge and massive mistake. It makes it come across as a cheap toy, when you get this thing in your hands, it is very not. This should have been marketed as a serious drawing tablet for children. If you currently have a tablet with a screen, you wouldn't want to downgrade to this, but if this was still available on the market, I would definitely get one for my niece. It's just a great tool for a kid. uDraw Studio. Instant Artist. Instant Artist is the pack-in title that was included with the PS3 and Xbox 360 versions of uDraw. It's essentially the same as uDraw Studio, but better in just about every way, and worse in a few extra. We have a mascot who's a starving artist. Look at how much he's struggling. He's starting to pixelate. But based on how his art skill is, I think he's probably going to stay starving. In Instant Artist, we have the same suite of tools, canvases, and some new backgrounds, but this one is much better as a pack-in title than the original studio because of its new additions. It features lots of new art tools. It also features an art school mode that teaches us step-by-step how to use the tablet and takes us through some art tutorials like painting still lifes, sketching tomatoes, lighting, shading, sketching, lining, designing posters, designing characters, perspective drawing, understanding the color wheel, and more. It was uDraw Studio, but better. If you're wanting to learn how to paint happy little trees and bushes, as well as many of the basic and some advanced artist skills, then this is the game to do it in. If you go to the extras, there are even some art prompts in there to help you figure out what you want to draw, which for many artists is the hardest part of art, just figuring out what to draw. There are plenty of other options for you should you decide to tire of freehand drawing. We have a coloring book with over 100 pages, tilt coloring where you roll a ball around the canvas that paints, tilt maze where you roll a ball through a maze trying to reach the exit as fast as possible, alien splat, it's whack-a-mole, but when you smack them, it makes paint appear where you smacked them, connect the dots, and paint by numbers. So should your child ever tire of drawing, they have some other mini games to play which will keep them busy for like 5 minutes because these are not great mini games. They're not exactly exciting, but buying this is cheaper than buying coloring books, activity books, and lots of crayons. In the long run, I'd say. Obviously there's very little appeal here for an adult, outside of making a YouTube video remarking on video game oddities. But for a child, this might keep them busy for a while. But I don't see this holding the average kid's attention long term unless they're very artistic, but I think you could definitely do a lot worse, as Wacom didn't come with any little fun games for you to play. So, if a kid's done drawing, that's it for the Wacom. Many of the games I'm talking about today will feature an art program, but for the uDraw, this game is the premier one, and it's great that it was a pack-in title for 2/3 of the player base for a whole 4 months. Again, there's not much you can say about this title. It's an art program with some small alternative activities. This version didn't add layers or anything, it didn't add pen stabilization, it's just uDraw Studio but more. I think that if you still have a Wii or Wii U and about $40 to spare, this game plus a uDraw would be a pretty affordable alternative. You won't get superhero pages in here, but if it's this or crayon art on your walls, then we already know that this is the better option. Dude's Big Adventure, Dude, uDraw, and Pictionary were among the launch titles available for the uDraw. Since uDraw was being pitched as more than an art tablet, we needed some serious games for this serious system. For many new hardware releases, the go-to for first titles is almost always a character action platformer. You know, you need a mascot to sell the device. Dude's Big Adventure is simultaneously that and not that. In Dude, you play a dude named Dude that is a little dude of your own design. You can rotate and paint his model however you wish, and this program works weirdly similarly to Surface Painter Pro, without any of the features beyond drawing on the body, so not like Surface Painter Pro at all. It's an option, and it's different. It's a pretty cool idea and a neat one, and you can tell that THQ was really trying their best with the art features on the device. The art system for drawing on your model is pretty robust, but doesn't match the suite of options that you'd have in the studio games. But it had the added benefit of taking these models you recolored and using them in the game as the player, enemies, and background objects. This is the closest that they ever got to a drawn-to-life game, unfortunately. The game itself consists of 4 modes, and they're all platformers that play like cheap mobile phone games that would have 5 ads playing between each of the stages. In Pen Panic, you run around the map controlling Dude with the stylus. He'd essentially follow the pen to the best of his ability. Then to jump, you'd tap, and to double jump, you'd draw a line underneath him to create a trampoline. For combat mode, you would collect a combat mode item that would then shift your pen controls into combat-specific controls. You'd use your new pen abilities to throw ink balloons at enemies to stun them, and then walk Dude into them to defeat them. Playing this game immediately tells you what you're in for, and it is not looking good. This game is very basic, simple, and generally very boring, relying entirely on the surprise of the gimmick. But if you own a Wii, you probably played a DS, or a Wii game, so none of these gimmicks are new or surprising. The gimmick wears off very quickly, because you've seen all this before. With touchscreen or with your Wii remote, I could reach to the shelf on my right and find numerous games that utilize these same gimmicks while being a much more entertaining game. Roly Poly is our next game, and it's better. Better in the sense that getting stabbed once is better than getting shot twice. You're in a ball, and you control it by tilting the tablet left and right. A to jump, and A again to ground pound. It's much more of a platformer, but now you have to deal with a bit of floatiness when controlling the ball. It's a much more direct form of control and more enjoyable than using the pen to move. But what's more enjoyable than this is using a control stick and playing any of the other platformers that were available on the Wii. There isn't any reason to bust this all out unless you're just wanting to draw too. These games overall feel like the sort of thing you'd see on a plug-and-play system, and considering plug-and-play were very popular at the time, maybe this tablet would have been better off as a plug-and-play system. Bubble Trouble is like a worse version of both of these previous games. You're trapped in a bubble, and to navigate the stages, you need to use the stylus to move the bubble about. Out of all of these ones, this one feels the most like a phone game, and there isn't much you can say about it. It's boring and annoying because each time you collide with an object, you see Dude pop out of his bubble, but then he reappears in a new one. There are no lives, there are no consequences, other than you slow down and you lose some time and you have to watch the animation. The last game is Fan Frenzy. Dude gets inflated big and round. Now, what makes it a good platforming game is probably tight controls and an appealing gimmick. What all of these games lacked were tight controls and appealing gimmick. Can't believe I'm going to reference Family Guy here, but what's a cobra without its venom? A weird belt. In Fan Frenzy, you use your stylus to blow Dude around the map. Wherever your pen is, it blows towards Dude, pushing him away from you. It's alright, but when you get to tiny, tight sections, the lack of precision makes for an annoying game. I think the thing this game is most guilty of is underestimating children's intelligence. People will say kids will watch anything or play anything, but children can tell when a game is terrible, and I don't think any kid would play this outside of drawing on the models. And even then, the drawing on the models isn't the best because the smaller the pen size is, the more it messes up and gets weird pen shapes that are not consistent. Thankfully, there are a lot of models to draw on, and a coloring book. As you finish stages, you receive stars based on your performance, then you can use them to buy more doodads and coloring pages to color in. But if you're forcing me to play this game to get more coloring pages, I think I'll just go to the store and buy a new coloring book instead. They're like $10. Much less than that if I guess if I just get a regular sized one, but if I'm getting a coloring book, I want one of the big thick ones. The most annoying thing about this game isn't even anything really to just do with itself. This 3D model and painting system could be really good if utilized really well in a better game. Imagine if this system existed in something like Amazing Island. Imagine being able to use the tablet to draw the model. After all, my biggest issue with Amazing Island was being forced to use a control stick to draw. This would fix that. Imagine if instead of this, they gave everyone Drawn to Life. They said this tablet was necessary for a good Drawn to Life game, and they never gave it to us. They just keep giving us hints of it. Like, where is it? The gameplay in Dude is entirely centered around gimmicks and mechanics that have all been done better elsewhere. Not even better in other games, but better in other games that THQ has designed already. They made Drawn to Life. They already made a great art-to-game style game, and instead gave us Dude's Big Adventure. They should have taken this tablet to Sega after they finished it and asked for Amazing Island. Playing Dude's Big Adventure only annoyed me because it showed me how much potential this tablet had that they wasted. Pictionary. This one is the one me and Mabel and the chatters on livestream had the most fun with. In Pictionary, you play charades with art. One person draws and their team tries to guess what the drawing is before the time runs out. In this one, we have a fun board game element where depending on the space you land on, you either get a noun, adjective, or verb, and you draw that. But for added difficulty, they added all play spaces, which means the opposing team can guess too. Basically, getting a chance to steal. If you've ever played Drawful, pretty much just that. Whichever team guesses right gets to roll the die and move on the board. The team that gets to the end and win the final guess wins the game. The comeback potential in this game is absolutely absurd. Mabel was behind me the whole game, and at the very end, she caught back up to me and won. When we played where the chat was our team, then the opposing team was the non-drawing player in the room. So if I was drawing, me and chat are the blue team, and Mabel was the red team. It was a fun dynamic of like one versus the crowd. Asymmetrical multiplayer. It was hands down the best part of the night. We played it the most, I think, for like 2 whole hours. But it's still just Pictionary. Saying this is the killer app of the toy is like saying the peas in the cup of noodles are the best part and the only reason to eat cup of noodles. You can just go eat peas. No one is going to stop you, you vegetable-enjoying freak. If you want to play Pictionary, there are a bunch of ways for you to play it, and 99% of them don't involve buying a uDraw tablet. You can play Drawful, Drawful 2, Draw Something, Gartic Phone. It's free and on your browser. Civic Doodle, Charades, Pictionary board game, hundreds of other board games. Hell, you can grab a piece of paper and a random word generator and play right now. There are just as many free ways to play Pictionary as there are paid ones. We had the same amount of fun playing this as we would have by playing Jackbox, and Jackbox is a lot cheaper. Now, maybe back in 2010, it was a little harder. There were none of these digital options, but you could still pull out a piece of paper, an egg timer, a pencil, and have everyone put a bunch of words in a hat. That would have been all free still. So, of course, this also takes care of Pictionary Ultimate Edition. It's just more Pictionary. Now that I own this, though, I can see myself maybe using it to play Pictionary, but I never would have bought a uDraw just to play it. I never would have spent $80. Because think about it. If you couldn't find the version that had Pictionary bundled, you'd have to spend more than $80. You'd have to buy a uDraw and a copy of Pictionary. That's $130 just to play a board game that you can get for a fourth of the cost. Even now, buying this stuff used is more expensive than buying the board game. I'd have to spend $25 to $45 depending on how eBay is feeling. SpongeBob SquigglePants. This title was the first title to be released after the initial launch of the uDraw, a whole 5 months after the tablet came out. This is what I meant by a lack of support. If you know anything about consoles, the thing that kills them the fastest is a bad launch, and a bad launch is caused by a poor selection of launch titles and taking too long to get new titles out. This wasn't a console, but it was a new piece of hardware, and with 1.5 million units made, they were certainly expecting it to be everywhere. But with this lack of support, they never really gave anyone a reason to get one. Remember, a year after this, the PS3 and Xbox 360 versions came out, and 4 months after that, the uDraw support was finally dropped. So 11 months after their first non-launch title, this toy died. The worst thing about it, though, is that SpongeBob SquigglePants is truly a great game. It's one I would have enjoyed even without the tablet. Had this come out at launch, or closer to, then maybe things could have been different. But I said the same if they actually made a drawn-to-life game utilizing the tablet. That's just because it needed good games. Anyway, SpongeBob SquigglePants is a beautiful combination of game made for Nintendo fans and game made for SpongeBob fans. You have no idea how happy I was as soon as I saw that the developer was WayForward and it popped up on screen, because as soon as I did, I knew we were in for a good time.
Why? Actually, anything?
Oh, WayForward. WayForward worked on this one. They made Shantae. There's hope.
There's no hope.
Mabel, there's hope. It's WayForward. After all, this is the developer that made great games like the Shantae series and Sigma Star Saga, which is one of my top 10 favorite games. Mabel didn't believe me when I said that it was going to be good, but then Patchy the Pirate appeared on screen, and it was a custom cutscene. This wasn't in any of the cartoons, and we both looked at each other and we smiled. We knew this one was going to be good. This was the first time in a long time that I was excited to play a game, and especially one that was a cartoon franchise game. After Patchy chats us up, he introduces us to his art collection. We click on it thinking it was going to be just another art game. We load in, and we have, you're not ready for this, a SpongeBob-themed WarioWare game with the cutest graphics ever. This was it. This was the game. We found the uDraw system seller, and we knew for sure because this was the second to last game we played. Nothing else on the uDraw was beating this. If you've ever played a WarioWare game, it has the same setup. A little bit of story plays, with Patchy doing some pirate shenanigans. Then we play the micro games, or as this game calls them, the nano games. Once we reach 20 wins, we move on to the next painting. Not only was the art style for each of these really cool, unique, and special, but the nano games all followed the art style. If you're a SpongeBob fan, I recommend you check this one out if you can. There's a 3DS version if you don't want to get the uDraw. If you've ever seen a collaborative art animation series like The Animatrix, or if you're a fan of art, you'll love this game just for being able to see SpongeBob in all these cool art styles. The microgames themselves are pretty simple. You drag, draw circles, tap, tilt the pad, shake the pad, and click the pen nib. It's your standard WarioWare affair. But the art and SpongeBob themes made this really special. This was the uDraw game. This one really showed off what it could do. It was a little repetitive after a while because there weren't that many games, and they didn't use a lot of gimmicks, but I can definitely see myself showing this off to more people, for more than just the sake of it being an oddity. Like, hey, do you want to check out a really cool SpongeBob game that nobody talks about? Yeah, it's a bit of the oddity part, but it's also because it's good. Everything else about this game exuded fun throughout. Even just failing was still fun, because Patchy would come in and do or say something funny to dunk on us for sucking. And it was a different one each time. It wasn't the same bad, oh shucks partner kind of thing. It was a different cutscene each time. If this game was your jam, there was a decent amount to do with it too, with unlimited mode and remix mode. Unfortunately, this is where the fun stops. Everything else from here on out is bad. Horribly bad. The rest are games that should have been played with a controller, but forced us to use the tablet instead. Kung Fu Panda 2. Released a whole 6 months after the launch of the uDraw as the second non-launch title, Kung Fu Panda 2, and it's by far the worst game out of all the ones that we played. This one was developed by Grip2Night. Gee, I sure hope she does. That'd make my night. Grip2Night, if I'm lucky, is a team that specialized, heavy air quotes on that one, in games for the uDraw. They made a fourth of the uDraw library and was later picked up by Glue Mobile, which brought us equally great, also air quotes, games like several Diner Dashes, Family Guy Uncensored, and The Price is Right. You know what's worse than an action-adventure game based off of a movie franchise? That same game, but controlled by a stylus and making it so that it can only be played this way on the Wii. Yep, not only are you expected to play a bad and ugly version of a movie game, you're expected to play it using the tablet. Speaking of ugly, this is what the DS version looks like. So here's your regular reminder that it can always get worse. To control Poe, you use the stylus to move him, and swipe the stylus to strike. The rest of the game has the same issues you'd expect from the other versions. You spam attacks, 20 in total, to defeat the enemy, then loot the room for collectibles, rinse and repeat. Can't tell you much else because the vomit-inducing graphics and horrible controls ended our play session early. We did have fun with the short time that we played, but it was almost entirely spent saying the horrible things that we'd let Tigress do to us. Playing this reminded me a bit of Okami and depressed me that we weren't getting Okami instead. Okami would have been a great title for this tablet, except swiping for attacks should be replaced with tapping. Before you say, "There's no way Okami could work like this," I'd like to remind you that Okami is on the Wii, plays great, and the entire game is there. So far, everything for this tablet has made me think, oh, could you imagine if they put better games on it? Okay, so I'm not going to pretend like this game exists in a vacuum. The reality of many of these games is that they were being developed alongside other platforms' versions, meaning that they couldn't get the full attention. That means that this was being worked on at the same time as the Kinect version. This is all true with the next game too. But these movie games were never meant to be good. They're meant to be cheap tie-ins that children want because they don't know any better. They don't understand that these games are often nowhere near as good as the films, because they haven't been taught yet that commercials can lie to them. That said, I've never watched Kung Fu Panda. Oh, tiger's feet.
Seriously, I bet they smell good.
Stop it. Have you never been to a stream before? This is pretty common behavior. The Penguins of Madagascar. Dr. Blowhole returns. Again. Another Grip2Night classic. Our favorite dev team and rejected porno name. Released 4 months after Kung Fu Panda 2 and almost an entire year after the release of the tablet. Surely by now they've learned from Squiggle Pants and the failure of Kung Fu Panda 2. It's been long enough now that they've definitely figured out how to unlock the potential of this tablet. If you're expecting innovation, then let me read the game title for you one more time. The Penguins of Madagascar. Dr. Blowhole returns. Again. In The Penguins of Madagascar, Dr. Blowhole Returns Again, we play the titular penguins of Madagascar, and the only thing worse than a stylus-controlled action game. A stylus-controlled action game and platformer. Now, the basis of what is here is cool and good, but ugly. Each of the penguins have abilities they can do, and each one is on a different part of the map. You can swap between them to solve each of their environments. I'd say puzzles, but it never gets to that level for me. That said, I've only played for 30 minutes. I don't think I need to play The Penguins of Madagascar Dr. Blowhole Returns Again all the way to review it. Don't think it's going to change that much. This style of gameplay and puzzle solving has been done a million times over, and it never ceases to be fun. Until now. Controls are via the stylus despite having a perfectly good D-pad just sitting right there. Not that it's my first choice for controls, but it's definitely better than the stylus controls. But it's fine. They made it better this time by showing a cursor on screen where you're pointing, something KFP2 didn't do. Sorry, the title was too long, I had to abbreviate it. In The Penguins of Madagascar Dr. Blowhole Returns Again, we get some cute little penguin feet showing us where we're going. The rest of the game is swapping to the appropriate penguin to finish the stage, and the goal is to collect mangoes for King Julian. It's a simple character action platformer with good controls despite their limitations. Maybe I'll play it on another system to see what it was like with a controller, but something tells me they're banking pretty hard on this gimmick considering they never released a non-uDraw version for the Wii. The game is only 3 hours long, so maybe I'll do a bad movie tie-in game video. Disney Princess, Enchanting Storybooks. This is one of the two that I got physical. Considering it came with my tablet, I'm guessing the parent bought the base bundle, then bought this separately for their kid. I'm sorry, buddy, that you didn't get better, and I'm sorry to the parent that was expecting better for this device. DPES came out a whole year after the tablet's release, and was developed by Disney Interactive Studios and Page 44 Studios. Diz is capable of making decent games like Spectrobes, and page 44 made Pictionary, so they're familiar with the hardware. But my hopes were not high, because those games were just okay. Before we talk about the game, I think Disney was fully aware that this wasn't the amazing device that THQ believed it was. On the first page, in the first paragraph, in the first sentence of the game manual, it says, "You can choose from 2 ways to create all of your favorite Disney princesses, paper or the uDraw game tablet and software." They then detail what you need to make traditional art. Here's what the whole first page says. You can choose from 2 ways to create all your favorite Disney princesses, paper or the uDraw game tablet and software. If working on paper, you'll need a few supplies. You may prefer using a drawing pencil to begin with, and it's always a good idea to have a pencil sharpener and an eraser nearby. When you finish drawing, you can add color with felt tip markers, colored pencils, watercolors, or acrylic paints, or draw your favorite princess using your uDraw game tablet and software. All the tools you need are at your fingertips. Use your stylus to select a brush from the drawing toolbar. The choice is yours. So yeah, I feel like Disney probably wasn't super confident in this hardware. It then shows several diagrams for how to draw all the Disney princesses of the current time. They forgot xenomorphs, but they didn't acquire Alien until after this. So this booklet teaches you what you need to know to draw without ever opening the software. To me, this screams that they aren't confident in THQ's hardware and are even urging you to not use it, which is really, really weird after selling me a $50 game. I got around to finally playing it and, well, it's okay. It's passable. It's perfectly fine and acceptable. It's a bunch of coloring pages, connect the dots, and tilt paint minigames, as well as an interactive storybook. The story reeks. This fairy was doing magic and messed up her spell, taking color from the world. You get it back for her by finishing the books. Each book is broken into chapters, which are made of the aforementioned minigames. There isn't any new story here. You just repeat the story from their movies. I think the main point of the game is to get little girls who are into one of the princesses to check out the other princesses' stories and eventually check out the movies. Each chapter can be complete in less than a minute, and it got me curious about the speedrun scene for this game. The best time is 18 minutes on the DS version, but no scores set for the Wii uDraw version. Turns out the Wii uDraw version takes a lot longer. I'm blaming it on it running poorly. I got 49 minutes and 50 seconds. It's kind of funny. I was watching the only DS speedrunner for this game, and the DS version runs so much better. So much better. Maybe it's because it's not on a disc or it wasn't being emulated, but I like to believe that they f***ed up the Wii release that bad. Also, it's weird. The DS version doesn't have cutscenes or fairy sections between the books. The screen is smaller too, and since it's a screen on the DS and not a screenless tablet, it's much easier and faster to play the DS version. So the games that are multi-platform but are for the uDraw on the Wii aren't even the best versions of them. Anyway, there really isn't much to say. It's an acceptable game, boring for sure, but it's not made for me. It's made for children, and I'm guessing they weren't too attached to it either since you can get it for a couple bucks. Marvel's Superhero Squad, Comic Combat. Another Kryptonite banger. Banger? I hardly know her. You thought I was gonna make another Kryptonite joke. To celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the uDraw tablet, we have Marvel's Superhero Squad, Comic Combat, and it's here to save us from having a good time. In Marvel Superhero Squad Comic Combat, we get to play a Diablo-like game that centers around our favorite Marvel comic characters with some of the cheesiest voice acting ever to be on screen, which alone sounds great. I love Marvel Ultimate Alliance. This isn't Marvel Ultimate Alliance though, in case you were wondering. I even asked Mabel, who I know can read.
Hey Mabel, can you read what that says on the screen for me?
That?
Yes.
It says Marvel Superhero Squad Comic Combat.
Am I right to assume that that is not Marvel Ultimate Alliance?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mabel.
Damn. Well, Marvel Superhero Squad Comic Combat is a Diablo-like that controls, say it with me, like shit. Sorry, you were expecting me to say with the tablet, and yeah, it does that too. You use the pen to control where to go, tap an enemy, and you auto-attack until they expire. To mix it up, you can use draw attacks like Okami. Draw a line to strike foes, draw an X to make a bomb, but they don't ever give you enough ink to draw a different game. You can also hold down on a character to launch their ultimate attack. This could have been a good game if you took direct control over the characters, but then we wouldn't be using the tablet that I spent 25 bucks on. The combat is boring. We tried to play it until a boss fight, but after 3 minutes, the entire next 30 minutes is walking up to a lightning rod and attacking it. Again, another game that barely functions and focused on functioning more than being fun. And it barely functions. This had potential. We've seen this formula work 3 times before, to be exact, actually. With that, we've covered every game to come out on the uDraw. 11 total, 10 that actually came out, 4 of them are the same game a second time, I still believe that this idea could work. I played with a functioning version of this tablet, and it's a perfectly fine device. It functions and even excels at what it does, but it's limited to the Wii and THQ as their publisher. Nowadays, it would be a lot harder to release this kind of thing, as the demand for what it needs to be able to do is a lot higher. If you were to do this now, you would need pen stabilization, you would need a screen, you would need layers, and I don't think anyone's gonna do that. It's very much a product of the time, and that was its perfect release window, and THQ messed it up. Had this been made by Nintendo or some other first-party publisher, then it certainly would have done much better. We can talk shit about the Wii U, but the Wii U is essentially this same exact thing, but with a screen, and it's still sold more than the uDraw. Not much more, but this alone is proof that this idea could work. The Switch, DS, and 3DS are all proof that this idea can work. THQ was just not the right one to do it. They should have stuck to simpler graphics, less ugly ones, and better games. Wow, I wonder if the game they made the device for, that they never added functionality for, would have been something like that. Maybe at the least they should have stuck with making just a couple 100,000 tablets instead and focus on improving the launch lineup for later releases. Maybe have Way Forward make all the games for it, since Squiggle Pants was the only good game on the device. This was never going to be the gaming device to beat them all. It was never going to hit 1 million units, but it in part inspired Nintendo to push this similar idea even further. They certainly learned what not to do from THQ. This was also never going to be the art tablet of the future, but had they stuck to art and quality games, then I think this could have been at least the perfect tablet for a young artist and inspired a generation. This could have been the device to inspire a generation to do art and to create. Instead, we got a good device collecting dust in warehouses. Thanks for watching, liking, and commenting. If you don't know what to comment, try an emoji or just say something you like about the video. Trust me, YouTubers love hearing compliments about their work, so anything nice is great. Also, let's thank the patrons and YouTube members who helped me pay for plastic garbage. Hey, at least I'm keeping it out of landfills. Thanks again to Marius, Yeenie, Quilla Raven, Worm, Syrup, Radiante, Rask, Ver, Beef, Bait, Sly, Colorado Blue, Vaderson, Linky, Spikejack, and Malding Brick. Alright, I gotta go. I have to go commission Art of Max Thunder Railing Femboys.